All right, let's dive into the world of anti-money laundering, AML. We've got this podcast episode aimed at compliance officers, but we want to break it down, make it accessible for everyone.
Yeah, and this episode is pretty intense. It claims that AML programs, they're lagging behind. Criminals are always a step ahead with their tactics, constantly innovating.
So it's like we're stuck with the old clunky tools while the criminals are out there with the latest and greatest.
Exactly. But what's interesting is this idea that AML can actually learn a thing or two from, get this, the world of
Okay,
startups.
startups, I'm listening. How do they fit into all of this?
Well, the episode draws these parallels between how agile startups are. They adapt quickly, and they're saying AML programs need to be more like that. They even use that phrase, move fast and break things.
Be fast and break things. That doesn't sound very AML, does it? Breaking things, I mean.
Well, it's not about literally breaking things, of course. It's more about taking that rapid iteration cycle that startups use and applying it to specific areas within AML. Instead of spending years on a massive new system, what if you focused on something smaller, like testing a new algorithm for transaction monitoring?
So instead of a huge overhaul, we're talking about more targeted experiments, kind of like A/B testing, right? You try different versions and see what sticks.
Exactly. Imagine testing two different onboarding processes, to see which one is faster at catching those risky customers. That's agility.
Makes sense. But what about all the regulations, all the compliance rules? AML teams can't just, launch something without making sure it's by the book, right?
Absolutely. The episode acknowledges those regulatory hurdles for sure, but it also argues that we can't be paralyzed by the fear of making a mistake. Sometimes progress means taking a calculated risk and being willing to adapt as you go.
Finding that balance between speed and compliance, I guess.
Yeah, precisely. The episode actually uses a really great analogy. It's like trying to hit a moving target. You wait for the perfect shot, you'll miss every time. You got to adjust your aim as you go.
Okay, I'm getting the move fast part.
Uh-huh.
But how does this actually look in practice? How could an AML team actually do this rapid testing?
Okay, we'll take customer due diligence, for example. Traditionally, it's been very manual, super time-consuming. But what if you used, say, some AI-powered tools to automate parts of that process?
So instead of analysts going through every document, the AI could flag the potential problems, and then the analysts could focus on the more complex cases.
Exactly. You could speed things up and also potentially improve accuracy because you're reducing human error. And that brings us to another startup lesson, embracing uncertainty.
Hold on. So we're moving fast, we're experimenting, and now we're adding uncertainty. Doesn't that sound a bit chaotic?
Not necessarily. Remember, startups, they often work in environments where they don't have all the answers right away. They have to make decisions, even with incomplete data. And they're okay with things not always going perfectly to plan.
But in AML, we're always striving for certainty, right? Especially with risk assessment.
True, but sometimes we need to shift our thinking. Instead of absolute certainty, we focus on making progress, even if it means accepting a bit of risk.
So instead of getting stuck trying to eliminate every single risk, we should be focused on mitigating the big ones and continuously improving our processes as we get more information.
Exactly. It's about accepting that perfection can actually be the enemy of progress. We can't let the pursuit of perfect data or a flawless system stop us from taking action and learning as we go.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this startup mentality could work in AML, but it still feels a bit counterintuitive. We're dealing with financial crime here. It's not like launching a new app.
I get it. The stakes are high in AML. But that's precisely why we need to be even more innovative, right? We can't just sit back while criminals are finding new ways to exploit the system.
So it's not about throwing caution to the wind and just trying anything. It's about being strategic with risk and innovation.
Exactly. And that brings us to another lesson from the startup world: constantly questioning the status quo.
So we've got moving fast, accepting uncertainty, and now we're questioning everything. What's next? Should we all start wearing hoodies to work?
Maybe the hoodie is optional, but that mindset of challenging assumptions is essential. Startups thrive on asking, is there a better way to do this? They don't just blindly accept how things have always been done.
Okay, I see how that's important in tech, which moves so fast.
Mhm.
But does it really apply to AML? We have regulations, we have set procedures. It's not like we could just reinvent the wheel every day.
Of course, we have to work within regulations, but that doesn't mean we should accept things that are inefficient or outdated just because that's how it's always been done.
So even within those regulations, there's room to innovate and improve.
Absolutely. Think about all the manual processes that still exist in a lot of AML programs. Are those really the best way to detect and prevent financial crime? Or are we clinging to them because they're familiar?
This makes me think about some of the systems we use in our own AML program. We've been using the same transaction monitoring software for years. It's clunky and slow. Maybe it's time to look at some of those newer AI-powered options.
That's a great example. It's easy to get stuck in a rut, assume the way we've always done things is the best way. But by questioning those assumptions and being open to new ideas, we can unlock improvements in efficiency and effectiveness.
So it's not just about the technology. It's about challenging our own mindset, stepping out of our comfort zone.
Exactly. And that brings us to another key lesson from startups: listening to your customers.
Now, I know we're talking AML, not selling products. So how does this customer concept even fit in?
Well, in AML, our customers are the investigators, the analysts, the compliance officers, everyone who uses our systems and processes every day.
Okay, so understanding the needs of our internal users.
Yes. Just like any successful business, we've got to be responsive to our users and focus on solving their pain points.
Right, if our systems are difficult to use, it's going to impact everyone's ability to do their job well.
Exactly. And the episode emphasizes that we need to understand the real pain points, not just the theoretical ones. Get into the trenches and actually listen to what people are struggling with.
So instead of assuming we know the problems, we should be actively asking our analysts, investigators, compliance officers for feedback.
Exactly. They're the ones on the front lines, dealing with these systems day in and day out. They can tell us what's working, what's not, and where we need to focus our efforts to make the biggest impact.
I can see how valuable that would be. Instead of relying on guesswork, we can use their insights to guide our innovation and make sure we're actually addressing the most pressing needs.
And that's really what this episode is all about. It's challenging us to rethink AML, embrace a more agile, customer-centric approach. It's a call to action for the entire industry to step up and keep pace with how financial crime is evolving.
I'm really seeing how these startup principles can be applied to AML. But before we go too far, maybe a quick recap. We've covered a lot. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Sounds good. Let's take a minute to review the key takeaways so far.
So we know AML programs need to speed up, catch up to those criminals in their Teslas, right? And we've got our 4 lessons from the startup playbook. Move fast, accept uncertainty, question everything, and listen to our customers, those people on the front lines using these systems every day.
And remember, these 4 principles, they all work together. You can't really move fast if you're not okay with a little uncertainty. And questioning everything, that often goes hand in hand with listening to your users, really understanding their pain points.
And so it's not about picking and choosing, it's about embracing all 4 as part of how we approach AML innovation.
Yeah, spot on. And this episode, it really drives that point home. It's not enough to just talk about innovation. We have to actually put these principles into action.
Are there any real-world examples of this, like companies or organizations that have actually applied these startup principles to their AML programs?
You bet. There are quite a few fintech companies that are using things like AI and machine learning to automate AML compliance. For example, some companies use AI to analyze customer transactions and flag suspicious activity in real time. They can respond to potential threats way faster than with traditional methods.
So instead of relying on those rule-based systems that criminals can easily bypass, they're using AI to spot patterns and anomalies that could point to money laundering.
Exactly. And the cool thing about AI is that it learns and adapts as it goes. The more data it processes, the better it gets at spotting suspicious activity.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
It sounds like those companies are taking that move fast and break things mantra seriously.
Well, maybe not literally breaking things, but they are pushing the limits in AML compliance. And what's interesting is that a lot of them are also big on that listening to your customers principle.
How so? Are they like doing surveys or focus groups with their AML analysts and investigators?
Some do, but others are going even further and embedding their developers and engineers right within their AML teams.
So the tech folks are working side by side with the compliance folks.
Yep. That way they get instant feedback on the tools and systems they're building and can make adjustments on the fly.
It makes a lot of sense. It ensures that the technology actually meets the needs of the people using it.
It does, and it's a perfect example of how these startup principles can be applied to AML in a practical way. Now, I know not every company has the resources to embed engineers in their AML teams, but there are other ways to get that collaboration and feedback going.
Yeah, like regular meetings or brainstorming sessions where analysts can talk about their challenges and suggest improvements.
Exactly. It's all about building a culture where feedback is valued and actually leads to changes. And that brings us back to the importance of questioning everything.
Because we don't constantly challenge those assumptions, look for ways to improve, we're going to fall behind.
Absolutely. The criminals aren't standing still, neither can we. We have to be proactive, innovative, and always striving to do better.
You know, it's interesting. The source also talks about this disconnect between how AML is perceived and what it's actually like.
Oh, what do you mean?
Well, there's this idea that AML is all about rules and regulations, that it's very rigid and inflexible. But the reality is, AML professionals are constantly adapting to new threats and challenges.
That's a good point. AML is dynamic. It requires a lot of creativity and problem solving.
Exactly. And I think this episode really captures that. It challenges us to think differently about AML and have a more innovative mindset.
I totally agree. It's a call to action for everyone in the AML community to step it up and never stop looking for ways to improve.
This conversation has been great, but the source throws out this really challenging question at the end.
You mean the one about what in your AML program is screaming to be disrupted?
Yeah, that's the one. Makes you stop and think, huh. It's like a challenge to look at our own AML programs with a critical eye and figure out where we can innovate.
It does, and I think it's a question that every AML professional should be asking themselves, because the answers could shape the future of AML.
And it's not just about thinking big, it's about actually taking action, right? Remember those startup lessons. Move fast, accept uncertainty, question everything, and listen to your customers. Those principles can guide us as we try to create AML programs that can really keep up with this fast-changing world.
I think that last point about listening to our customers, that's worth emphasizing. It's easy to get lost in the technical side of AML, the regulations, the data analysis, all that. But it's the people on the front lines who are using these systems every single day.
Yeah, they're the ones who can tell us what works, what doesn't, where we need to focus our energy to make a real difference. We have to build a culture where their feedback isn't just accepted, it's sought out and used in decision-making.
Exactly. Their insights are so valuable, they can help us find those areas where we can streamline, be more efficient, and ultimately make our AML programs more effective at fighting financial crime.
It's all about collaboration, bringing the technical experts together with the people who have that real-world experience on the front lines. That's how we can start to close the gap between how fast criminals are innovating and how quickly we can adapt and respond.
This episode has been really eye-opening, you know? It's a wake-up call for everyone in AML to step it up, embrace innovation, and never stop questioning how we can do things better.
What I find so inspiring is that this episode doesn't just point out the problems. It gives us a way forward, concrete steps we can take to make a difference. And it reminds us that even in a field as complex as AML, there's always room for creativity, innovation, and that constant drive for progress.
Totally agree. It's like an invitation to think differently, be bold, and never just settle for the way things are. The fight against financial crime never ends, and we all have a role to play in rising to that challenge.
And that challenge starts with each one of us.
Ooh.
So to wrap up, I want to leave you with that same question from the source. What's one thing in your world that's screaming to be disrupted?
It's a question worth thinking about. The answers we find today could change AML for years to come.
Maybe it's time to finally ditch those clunky spreadsheets, and really explore a more automated approach to sanctions screening. Or maybe it's about how we train our analysts. Like, ditch those boring PowerPoint presentations and make it more interactive, hands-on learning.
Yeah, those are great examples. And don't forget about those small changes. They can be powerful too.
Yeah.
Sometimes just a little tweak to a process or finding a new way to visualize data can make a big difference in how efficient and effective we are.
This really feels like a call to action for everyone, not just AML folks, but anyone involved in fighting financial crime, right?
Right.
We can't just sit back and relax.
Absolutely. But the good news is there's a ton of resources out there to help us. Industry conferences, webinars, online communities, forums. There's so much knowledge and expertise to tap into.
It's like we've got this whole network of innovators and people who are really pushing the boundaries of what's possible in AML.
And the more we connect with each other, share ideas, and collaborate, the faster we can make progress.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this thought. Don't be afraid to try new things, even if you're worried about failing.
Remember, even the most successful startups, they've had setbacks, they've had challenges. It's all part of learning and growing.
And who knows, maybe the next big breakthrough in AML will come from someone like you, someone who's willing to challenge the status quo, think outside the box.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into AML. We hope you found it insightful, maybe even a little inspiring. Until next time, keep pushing those boundaries, and remember, the future of AML is in our hands.